Vivek, I guess having the buy on AMD and the underperform on Intel kind of says everything about where we are right now.
That's exactly right, Carl. Thank you for having me. Good morning. I think AMD is just getting started. The company grew 50% and to 60% in the last 5 years. And their market share in their core business of PC and server CPU is still only 15%. So every year, as they are gaining share, it's on the fact that they are targeting the right set of customers in cloud computing. Management team is executing extremely well, and they're getting very good support from their manufacturing partners at TSMC and other main foundries. And at the same time, Intel seems to be distracted in investing in a lot of foundry business, which we don't think is core to them regaining their footing in this market. So we think AMD is just getting started, and we see earnings potentially doubling to tripling over the next few years.
How are they, I mean, to explain to viewers, it's one thing to execute on the design and the engineering and the sales, but you mentioned that foundry partnerships, not winding up with some of the other chain congestion that we've seen in the industry. How are they doing that?
Sure. I think, Carl, the one important thing that has been perhaps missed in the discussion of supply shortages is that there are certain end markets in semiconductors that are getting some preference. So if you are selling to the cloud computing customers, you are getting more preference from the supply chain. So that's a very important, as opposed to serving the automotive and industrial markets that went through a lot of cyclical upheaval and trade tensions over the last few years. Cloud computing demand has been very strong. So it's important to target the right markets. Number two, what's also important is focus. That when you have companies such as AMD or NVIDIA or Broadcom or Marvell, who are focused on design and letting somebody like Taiwan Semiconductor focus on the manufacturing side, when you bring the two sides together, which have their respective focus, that's why you see this group of companies producing the right results, as opposed to others who are trying to attack both the design and the manufacturing side, which we think is an inherently flawed strategy.
Vivek, to go a little bit deeper into the relationships that AMD has developed with OEMs for years and years, the issue was, boy, they couldn't get into more than just the value segment, for example, with PC makers. Being consistent on server was difficult. Now they've got this strategy that includes looking forward what Lisa Su is calling heterogeneous computing, first in servers, eventually in PCs. How stable are those OEM relationships, and what should we take away from the share gain that they've had, given that they're cracking into areas that were so hard for them to maintain a foothold in before?
Absolutely. John, so if we look back in the history of AMD, back in 2003, they were at a similar position when market share was low, but over a period of 3 years, their market share in servers went from 5% to 26%. That was on the strength of a product. And at that time, if you remember, there was nothing called the cloud. It was all enterprise customers. So the point is that whenever companies have the right product, they're able to engage with these customers very quickly. Now, if you fast forward to where we are now, AMD's market share in servers has gone from essentially nothing to close to 15%, and we think it has the capability to go to 30 to 35. And why is that? Because the cloud customers are spending at a very fast clip, right? We saw last year, Facebook said that they're going to invest 66% more this year. Well, how do you spend 66% more? You need a reliable partner who's executing well on the design side, who's then backed up by the right set of manufacturing and then the right back end in terms of substrates and other capacity. So I think those are the stars that are aligning for AMD. And as I mentioned, they're just getting started, and we think their market share could go up. Now, you're right that cracking the enterprise business is tougher. It does take a longer period of time. But we saw in the last quarter that AMD reported their server sales to enterprise also doubled year on year, which was even faster than what Intel has managed to do. And last point I would quickly make is that for the first time, we saw AMD's business in the data center is actually more profitable than Intel's business in the data center, even though AMD is much smaller today.